All right, let's jump right into it. Today we're exploring a state of being that honestly can feel pretty unsettling. It's called hollowness. But what if this feeling isn't a problem? What if it's actually a sign of huge progress on a deep inner journey? It's this curious kind of emptiness that doesn't come from loss, but from, well, from growth.
And this wisdom from the Tao Te Ching it nails it, right? Sometimes that feeling of emptiness isn't something you need to fix or fill up. It's more like a clearing, a space being made for something totally new to come in. It's that profound stillness right before the next big insight.
So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll dive into what this curious emptiness feels like. Then we'll define what it is, and just as importantly, what it isn't. We'll talk about the confusing side effects, the traps to watch out for on the path, what its actual purpose is, and finally, why it's a necessary clearing for the real work to begin.
Okay, so let's start with the paradox of it all. I want to be really clear. This isn't just, feeling a bit down or having a bad day. It's a very specific state that shows up when your inner work starts to get serious, when it really starts to dismantle the person you thought you were.
And this is where it gets really weird. You might find that your sense of direction, your spiritual path, becomes sharper and clearer than ever before. You know where you're going. And yet, at the exact same time, it feels like you are dissolving, just falling apart. This is a classic sign of a phase in alchemy they called nigredo, a sort of blackening, where your old identity is just in flux.
So what is this state of hollowness, really? Let's get precise, because the distinctions here are absolutely crucial to get right. The two words you have to remember here are functional and transitional. This state is doing a job, and it's not permanent. It's not the final destination. Think of it like a working absence. You haven't gotten rid of your old habits yet, but you've hit the pause button on the emotions that fuel them.
Now, this is maybe the most important point to get straight from the start. This productive, generative hollowness is not depression. It's not a heavy, bleak state of being. And it's also not the void, the ultimate goal of enlightenment. It's a productive, in-between space, a workspace.
So what does it actually feel like to be going through this? Well, get ready for some serious contradictions. It can be confidence-boosting and incredibly confusing, all at the same time.
This leads to something the Source calls divided confidence. It's wild. On one hand, you develop this unshakable trust in the path, in the Dharma. You just know it's real. But at the same time, your investment in the day-to-day drama of the world, in samsara, just collapses. It all starts to feel a bit like a movie you're no longer starring in.
And a really common and kind of frustrating side effect of this is decision paralysis. Suddenly you can't even decide what to eat for lunch. This isn't a sign of some profound wisdom, it's more of a temporary glitch. The old drivers, I want this or I hate that, have gone offline. But the new, more refined wisdom hasn't fully booted up yet.
Now, anytime you're on a deep inner journey like this, there are going to be pitfalls. It's so important to know what they look like so you don't end up getting stuck.
So we need to watch out for three big traps. The first is premature completion, thinking, this is it, I'm enlightened. Spoiler alert, you're not. The second is what the Source calls skandha demons. This is when you get attached to the feeling of emptiness itself, making being hollow your new cool identity. And the third trap is the sneakiest, spiritual pride, where you start looking down on everyone else still caught up in all their drama.
This table here lays out the most critical distinction of all. Generative hollowness is not nihilism. They feel completely different. Hollowness is spacious, it's neutral, it's kind of like waiting. It withholds judgment so you can observe things more clearly. Nihilism? That's bleak, it's heavy, it feels meaningless. It actively rejects that anything has value, and that just leads to despair. They are worlds apart. So here's a really good question to ask yourself if you're feeling stuck. Am I not making a decision because I truly believe it's all pointless? That's nihilism. Or am I not acting because I am consciously practicing wise restraint and waiting for clarity? That's the generative state. The why behind your inaction tells you everything you need to know.
Okay, so if it's not the end game and it's full of all these potential traps, what is it actually for? What's the function of this whole experience?
The best way to think about it is through this great metaphor of the empty vessel. Look, you can't pour fresh, clean water into a cup that's already full of mud, right? You have to empty it out first. That's what hollowness is. It's the process of dumping out all the old junk, all the faulty beliefs and reactions to make room for you to actually see reality clearly.
And that brings us to a really practical tool you can use, called the hollow check. It's so simple. When you feel that sense of detachment, just pause. Ask yourself one simple question. Does this feel spacious or does it feel heavy? And then just notice the quality of the feeling. Don't judge it, just note it. This little practice can turn all this theory into a powerful tool for awareness.
All right, let's pull all these pieces together and see where this state is ultimately supposed to take us. What's next on the path?
This quote from the philosopher Epictetus just says it all, doesn't it? You can't learn anything new if you think you already have all the answers. The process of becoming hollow is really the process of humbling yourself enough to say, maybe I don't know, and that's the only way real learning can actually begin.
So if there's one thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Hollowness is not a destination. It's not a place to set up camp and relax. It is a workspace. It's a neutral, cleared-out piece of ground where the next, and maybe even more challenging, phase of your work is about to begin.
Because as that old scaffolding of the self finally falls away, this new emptiness allows ancient, deep-seated patterns to surface. And our source leaves us with this provocative final thought. In this quiet, neutral space, we turn next to the beast. The very foundation of our identity, now laid bare, ready for transformation. But what happens then? Well, that's a topic for another day.
You've heard the words, right? The beast. 666. Instantly you think of, doom and gloom, the end of the world. But what if we've got it all wrong? What if it's not some ancient prophecy about the future, but a user's manual for the beast that's right inside you, right now? Let's decode this thing, treat it like a schematic, and see what it tells us about how our own minds are wired.
So first things first, let's just forget all the fire and brimstone stuff for a minute. The perspective we're exploring here suggests that when you look at an image like this, you shouldn't see some monster out there to be afraid of. Instead, you should see a mirror that reflects back the most automatic, the most conditioned parts of your own mind.
And the craziest part? The clue to this whole thing is hiding in plain sight, right in the text itself. It says, let the one who has understanding calculate the number. Calculate. And then it says, for it is the number of a man. See, it's not telling us to run screaming from some monster. It's an invitation. It's basically saying, hey, you, understand this, figure out the mechanism.
Okay, so for our purposes here, we're going to put theology on the shelf. Let's not get bogged down in that. We're going to approach these ancient symbols as if they're exactly what this framework suggests they are, a technical schematic, a blueprint, really, for our conditioned personality. That ego structure we all live with.
All right, so let's dive in. We're going to treat this so-called prophecy not as a prediction, but as a psychological map, a guide to help us navigate the inner territory of our own identity.
Now, the first thing you have to get is that the beast isn't just one single thing. Not at all. According to this way of looking at it, it's more like a composite system. Think of it as an assembly of different psychological parts, all working together. So let's pull it apart and look at the components, shall we?
Okay, so here they are, the three main players in this system. And honestly, a really good way to think about them is in tech terms. You've got the dragon. That's kind of like the primal source code. Then there's the first beast, which is your public-facing user interface. Your social profile, the you that everyone sees. And finally, the second beast. That's the operating system humming away quietly in the background, running everything on pure, raw instinct. So let's start with the big one, the dragon, sometimes called the demiurge. What is it? Well, it's that raw, primal sense of I am. It's not evil, not in this model. It's described more as a kind of developmental error. Just imagine, a new consciousness just blinks into existence. It looks around and pretty naturally concludes, well, this must all be about me. I'm the center of the universe. That's the dragon. And that dragon, that primal I, is what gives power to the next part, the first beast. This is your personality. It's your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your carefully curated Instagram feed. It's the version of you that you've built, brick by brick, to navigate the world, to survive, to get ahead, to be liked, and to keep yourself safe. Yeah, it's basically the public-facing CEO of You Incorporated. So what's fueling this CEO? What's feeding that personality? Well, that's the second beast. Think of it as the constant, quiet hum of your nervous system. It's just a raw data stream of like, dislike, want, don't want. It's constantly digging through your memories and instincts to find evidence that proves the first beast's story about itself is true. Okay, so that's the anatomy of the beast, right? The three parts. But what about that number? How does the infamous 666 fit into all of this? Well, we're about to decode it. And not as some mark of evil, but as a really precise formula that explains how our consciousness gets, well, nailed down.
And I want to be super clear about this. In this psychological model, 666 is not a sign that you're a bad person. It's not a judgment, it's an operational formula. It just describes a state of being. That state where you are completely 100% identified with and trapped by your own personality.
So where does this all come from? The key to unlocking this number is a practice called gematria, where letters have numerical values. And in Hebrew, the number 6 corresponds to the letter Vav. And guess what Vav means? It literally means a nail, or a hook, something that you use to pin one thing to another.
So if 1 6 is a nail, what's the 666? Well, it signifies our consciousness being nailed down on 3 different levels. Imagine this. You've got one nail pinning you to your physical body and its sensations. You've got another nail pinning you to your emotions, all those wants and fears. And a third nail pinning you to your mind, all your thoughts and the stories you tell yourself. You get completely fixed, completely stuck on these temporary states, and you start to mistake them for who you really permanently are.
All right, so if 666 is the formula for being totally stuck, the natural question is there a way out? Is there an escape hatch? And yes, this system offers a counterprinciple. It's the antidote to the beast's constant, automatic, reactive nature.
And that antidote, you might guess, is also symbolized by a number, 333. It's exactly half of 666. It represents the force that starts to loosen that fixation, that begins to pry up the nails that have pinned our consciousness down.
This is what's called the Watcher. And no, it's not some avenging angel coming down to save you. It's a skill. It's something you can actually develop. It's the ability to create this quiet, stable point of inner calm. And from there, you can just observe the beast's reactions. This is the secret, right? This is how you stop snapping in anger or getting totally paralyzed by anxiety. You watch the impulse bubble up and you just don't act on it.
I mean, look at the contrast here. It's night and day. The beast is pure impulse, just chaos, reacting to anything and everything to survive. But the Watcher, it's the total opposite. It's ordered, it's restrained, it's observational. Its goal isn't just to grab another cookie because it feels a craving. No, its goal is to understand the craving itself. And when you do that, the craving starts to just dissolve. It's the difference between being a slave to your moods and becoming the calm eye of your own hurricane.
Okay, so this is all fascinating theory, right? But here's the crucial part. How do we make this practical? How do we actually take this map and use it to navigate the wild territory of our own minds? And this next point is absolutely key, so listen close. This is not about declaring war on yourself. You can't destroy the beast. Why? Because in a way, it is your personality, your ticket to function in the world. The goal is much more subtle. It's to stop being its slave. It's about learning how to patiently and kindly lead your own personality instead of being yanked around by its endless, exhausting drama. So here's something you can try, a little practice. The next time you feel that obsessive, stuck feeling, you know the one, use this 666 formula as a diagnostic tool. Just pause and ask yourself, okay, where's the nail in my body right now? Is it a tight chest, a clenched jaw? Then, where's the nail in my emotions? Is it a fear of failure, a craving for some attention? And finally, what's the story? What's the mental nail that's holding this whole thing together?
So, I'll leave you with this, a question to take with you. Right now, in this very moment, just check in with yourself. Where is your consciousness nailed down? Is it hooked on a sensation in your body, a wave of some emotion, or a story that's just replaying on a loop in your mind? Because here's the beautiful part. The moment you notice the nail, you've already started to loosen it.
You know, tucked away in the deepest parts of Western esoteric traditions, there's this figure, a guardian standing at a critical threshold of the mind. They call it the Watcher of the Abyss. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and find out what it really is, how it works, and why it's absolutely not what you think it is. Let's dive in.
Wow. I mean, that passage from the book of Revelation really sets a dramatic stage, doesn't it? It talks about a bottomless pit and its angel or king. For centuries, this kind of imagery has totally shaped our ideas of some terrifying, literal underworld. But what if that pit wasn't somewhere out there? What if it was deep inside of us?
So in these traditions, this guardian has a name, Choronzon. But let's be super clear about this from the get-go. We are not talking about some literal external demon with horns and a pitchfork. Choronzon is the personification of a very specific, very human feeling, that deep, primal dread that rises up when our sense of self, everything we believe we are, is threatened with complete annihilation.
So yeah, the abyss isn't some chasm of fire and brimstone. It's a metaphor for a gulf within the landscape of your own mind. The journey to cross it isn't an external quest. It's a journey inward, right into the very structure of your own psyche.
Okay, so to really understand this guardian, we first need a map of the territory it patrols, right? There are a few key concepts we have to get our heads around to even begin to navigate this inner world.
First up, the abyss itself. Think of it as a gap in your knowledge, a blind spot in your understanding that separates your normal, everyday personality from a much deeper, more profound reality. And here's the kicker. The only way across is to let go of that personality. You have to be willing to dissolve the ego.
Now, on the Kabbalistic map of consciousness, that's a mystical Jewish tradition, this gulf is located at a very interesting point called Da'at. It literally means knowledge. It's not a physical place you can visit, but it's the conceptual threshold where your personality comes face to face with its own limits. So how does this path to the abyss get filled with so much scary stuff? Well, it's through a process we all use every single day: repression. We push away things that make us uncomfortable: memories, fears, impulses. But here's the thing. They don't just vanish. They pile up in our subconscious, just waiting.
All right, now that we have our map and we know what fills the abyss, we can finally get to the heart of the mystery. We are ready to confront the so-called demon and reveal its true identity.
So what is this terrifying watcher that stands at the gate, armed with our deepest, darkest fears? Is it some ancient evil, a test from God? What are we really facing when we step into that darkness?
Well, the answer is both way simpler and a whole lot more challenging than you might think. It's not a demon, it's a mirror. The watcher of the abyss is a reflection of you.
And this is how that mechanism works.
See, Choronzon isn't a thing, it's a process. It takes all of your remaining attachments to your identity, your memories, your desires, what Buddhist philosophy calls the skandhas, and it reflects them back at you as perfectly tailored fears. It has no power of its own. Zero. All of its strength is borrowed from your own refusal to let go. This quote just nails the central paradox, doesn't it? That desperate attempt to save your life, your ego, your self-image, that's exactly what causes you to lose it in the confusion and terror of the abyss. The only way to find what's truly real is to be willing to lose the self you're clinging to so tightly.
So if this isn't a battle of strength, then what is it? It's a test of relinquishment. And there is a very specific psychological art to letting go, a precise method for actually crossing this threshold.
Just look at this table. It contrasts the two different approaches perfectly. Most of us live our entire lives in repression, constantly burning energy to push things down. And that just leads to neurosis and projection. The alternative is resolution. You integrate all that stuff into your awareness. And look at the energy cost. Zero. The result is clarity. You go from a life of avoidance to one of neutral observation.
And this is such a crucial distinction to make. The goal here isn't catharsis, screaming into a pillow or letting it all out. That can actually make things worse by reinforcing the personal story behind the emotion. The goal is de-identification, seeing a feeling come up and then pass away without ever labeling it as mine. It's just an event in consciousness, not your identity. So here it is. This is the ultimate test. It's not about courage or power. It's about facing loss. The loss of your status, of being right, of your most treasured idea of who you think you are, and simply not reacting. Can you let it all go without becoming resentful or without retreating into a fantasy where you're still the hero?
When you pass that test, when you finally, truly let go, something absolutely profound happens. You don't defeat the watcher, you dissolve it. Let's take a look at the incredible transformation that happens after you cross the abyss.
Okay, here's the play-by-play. Step 1, that repressed stuff bubbles up and makes contact with your awareness, and that causes fear. Step 2, your ego reacts. It panics and clings to its story for dear life. This clinging is what gives the watcher its terrifying face. But then comes step 3, insight. You see the fear for what it is, just an empty, conditioned event. This is the insight of anatta, the Buddhist concept of non-self. The whole illusion just collapses, and in step 4, you can finally let go. You cross.
And this is the whole point. This is not a heroic battle. The horror doesn't vanish because you were strong enough to beat it. It vanishes because you finally realize the you that was so terrified was never solid in the first place. It was just a shadow.
And the result of that realization is incredible. This slide shows that 5 fundamental chains, or fetters, just fall away. The delusion that you are a separate self, that crippling doubt, those unhealthy attachments, they just lose all their power. And this isn't just a temporary mood change, we're talking about a permanent structural shift in your consciousness.
Which really just leaves us with one final thought, doesn't it? The Watcher gets all of its power from the things we refuse to let go of. So the real question isn't about what monster might be lurking in the dark. The real question is, what part of your story, what piece of your cherished self-image are you most afraid to lose?
Okay, so today we're going to build something I like to think of as a mental vehicle. It's based on this really ancient and powerful metaphor from a text called Brahma's Chariot, and it's designed to help us navigate the, let's face it, often messy world of our own minds with real clarity and strength. So let's get into it. You know, this quote it sets the stage perfectly. It points to a quality of mind that is boundless. And that very idea, that word boundlessness, that's the key that unlocks this entire structure we're about to build. So where does a journey like this even begin? Well, first things first, we have to understand the terrain we're even trying to cross. And the starting point for this journey, it's a place of inner chaos. And you know this feeling, right? I think we all do. It's that internal static, that sense of being trapped in a loop of worry or judgment. It's that feeling of burnout or anxiety, where nothing feels clear and every single thought just feels heavy. You know, the ancient alchemists had a fantastic word for this state. They called it nigredo. It literally means blackening. It's that phase of any deep inner work where things feel like they're just falling apart. But here's the thing, it's not a dead end. In fact, it's the essential raw material for transformation. And this is where our chariot comes in. Now, this isn't some religious icon we're supposed to worship. No, think of it as a powerful metaphor for the mind, a practical working vehicle designed to carry us through that state of chaos and out into clarity. So, what exactly powers this thing? What makes it go? Well, it runs on 4 very specific mental qualities that serve as its wheels. These 4 factors are known as the illimitables, or upamanya, if you're curious about the original text. They're basically the engine of this chariot. They provide all the momentum we need to move from that state of confusion to real stability. And here they are, the 4 wheels of our chariot: kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and equanimity. But the real magic, the part that changes everything, is in why they're called illimitable. See, that word illimitable, it's not just some nice poetic term. It's an operational definition. It means that when you stop filtering these qualities through your personal preferences, when you stop asking, well, who deserves my kindness, or does this person really earn my compassion, the quality itself stops being something you can run out of. It becomes a stable, boundless state you can actually rest in. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the first 3 wheels. These are all what you'd call relational, meaning they're directed towards other beings. First up, we have kindness, or metta. And look, this isn't the kind of tit-for-tat kindness we're all used to, where we're nice to people who are nice back to us. No, this is a radical, non-selective kindness. Technically, it's defined as simply the absence of hostility, which means you can extend it even to an enemy, not because they deserve it, but because you refuse to carry the poison of ill will in your own mind. Next up, compassion, or karuna. The biggest roadblock here is what the source calls the contract of judgment. You know that little voice in your head that says, well, they kind of brought that on themselves? That's the contract. True compassion breaks that contract. It recognizes that suffering is just a universal condition, and it's completely separate from anyone's moral worth. And wheel number 3 is appreciative joy, or mudita. This one is huge, especially today. It is the direct antidote to envy. Instead of scrolling through social media and seeing someone else's success as somehow your loss, you learn to genuinely resonate with their happiness. This gives you access to a nearly infinite source of joy that has nothing to do with your own personal ups and downs. So those first 3 wheels are incredibly powerful, right? But they all kind of rely on this subject-object thing. You know, me feeling kindness for you. But this 4th wheel, equanimity, well, it plays a completely different game. It operates on a whole other level. Okay, first things first, let's just get the biggest misconception out of the way right now. Equanimity is not indifference. They are polar opposites. Indifference is checking out, withdrawing because you're tired or you just don't care. Equanimity is being fully engaged, totally present, but with this profound sense of balance that comes from seeing things clearly without getting hooked by your own knee-jerk reactions. So, how in the world do you get to that place of balance? Well, it all rests on a really deep insight, realizing that the things we're reacting to, they aren't as solid as they seem. For instance, think of an apple. It's not some fixed, solid thing out there in the world. It's actually a stream of sense data, color, texture, smell, that our mind cleverly bundles together and slaps a label on. Let's walk through how this actually works in your mind moment to moment. First, your mind takes some sensory input and it labels it. Enemy, for example. Then it makes a mistake. It confuses that label for a solid, real thing. That triggers an automatic reaction of aversion. But the insight of equanimity interrupts this whole chain reaction. It lets you see the enemy not as a solid person, but as a temporary, shifting collection of conditions. And when that object is no longer seen as solid, your reactivity, it has nothing to grab onto. It just lets go. This quote from the Downton Sutra just nails it. Equanimity isn't about ignoring the world. It's about seeing its dreamlike, almost holographic nature. And when you can see that, you just can't be so easily pushed and pulled around by it anymore. Okay, so that's the blueprint, right? But how do we actually, build the thing and drive it? To navigate this path, we've got to be really honest about the common pitfalls and roadblocks. You see, each of these four wheels has something called a near enemy. It's a distortion that looks and feels a lot like the real virtue, but it's actually just a sneaky form of attachment. For kindness, the near enemy is sentimental attachment, loving someone because of how they make you feel. For compassion, it's pity, which always has that subtle hint of superiority. Think of this table as a diagnostic tool for your own mind. Are you cultivating the real thing or its near enemy? And really, this is the whole point. Those near enemies, they aren't just little mistakes you make along the way. They are the brakes on your chariot. They are the very specific boundaries and limits you are currently placing on your mind that are preventing these amazing qualities from becoming truly boundless and transformative. So, let me leave you with a challenge, a little experiment. For just one single day, try to conduct what you might call a judgment audit. Just notice every single time your compassion hesitates or stops dead in its tracks. What was the thought that blocked it? They deserved it. They're just so annoying. Whatever it is. Just acknowledge that thought, because right there, that's the specific limit currently placed on your chariot. The real question is, what would it take to release it?
When you're on any path of growth, you kind of expect to face certain obstacles, right? Things like laziness, self-doubt. But what if the biggest, most dangerous enemy isn't an obstacle you have to climb over? What if it's actually a hidden byproduct of your own success? Today, we're going to meet Mara, the enemy that shows up right inside your greatest achievements.
And this really gets to the heart of it. As we start to get better at something, as we overcome those first few hurdles, the nature of the danger totally changes. It stops being about whether you're going to fail. Instead, it becomes about this subtle, kind of distorted version of success. And that's when a much more clever, much more sophisticated antagonist starts to wake up inside.
And this brings us right to our first section. The obstacle evolves, because the game totally changes at this point. We're not talking about simple resistance anymore, like just hitting a wall. We're moving into the realm of active, internal deception, a force that, in Buddhist traditions, has a name, Mara.
So who is this Mara exactly? It's really crucial to understand he's not your typical devil or demon figure. Some lord of the underworld out to punish you for sin. Think of Mara as the lord of the senses. His goal isn't to make you evil. His goal is much subtler. It's to keep you completely fascinated and entangled by your own experience, to bind you to the never-ending drama playing out in your own head.
So let's dive a little deeper here in Section 2 and properly meet Mara, the Lord of Senses. We're going to map out his territory and see exactly what he is the king of.
And this lays it out perfectly. Mara's domain is basically everything we think of as me, our physical body, our feelings as they come and go, our perceptions, all our thoughts and mental chatter, and even consciousness itself.
The second we identify with any of these changing things, the moment we say, "That's me," we've just stepped right into his world. And that's where he does his work, twisting our genuine insights into platforms for pride.
So how does he actually do it? Well, that brings us to Section 3, the ego's hijack. We're about to break down Mara's main strategy, which is amazing. The source describes it as working like a systemic immune response that's designed to attack your own liberation.
I mean, we can all relate to this one, right? Have you ever had a little breakthrough or figured something out and you get that rush, that little internal voice that says, "Wow, I'm pretty good." That feeling of specialness, that is Mara's foot in the door.
Let's walk through this 4-step trap. It starts with step 1, insight. You have a real, genuine realization. But then almost instantly, step 2 happens, appropriation. The ego swoops in and claims it. I did this. I attained this. This leads directly to step 3, inflation, that feeling of specialness we just talked about. And finally, the trap springs. Step 4, distraction. All the energy from that beautiful insight gets diverted into building a new story about yourself, and your actual forward progress just stops.
And this is not just some abstract idea. This mechanism has serious, real-world consequences. This is the source code for the fallen guru phenomenon. Their fall almost never starts with bad intentions. It starts with this one, simple, uncorrected mistake. They take a genuine spiritual experience and they make it theirs. They start to believe their own hype and become intoxicated by it.
Okay, so to get an even clearer picture of Mara, it helps to distinguish him from some other figures you might have heard of. Let's consult our little guide to inner demons.
This table makes it super clear. You've got Mara, whose domain is psychological. His job is temptation, to bind you from the inside through manipulation. Then you have someone like Yama, who's all about karma. He's not trying to trick you, he's a neutral judge, simply reflecting consequences. And Yakshas are totally different. They're fierce spirits tied to a specific territory. So the key thing to remember is that Mara is the enemy within.
All right, so we get the problem, we see the trap, we understand the danger. What's the solution? This is where it gets incredibly elegant. Welcome to Section 5, the power of recognition. This was the primary technique the Buddha used, and its simplicity is just profound. No complicated rituals, no epic inner battles, just a simple, direct statement, "I see you, Mara." The moment you see the pattern for what it is, it starts to lose its power over you. And this is the most crucial insight of all. This is not a fight. The moment you start struggling with these thoughts, arguing with them, you're just feeding them energy. You're playing their game. The right approach is to treat it like a diagnosis. You just observe the symptom, that rush of pride, that story about yourself, and you calmly name the condition.
By just naming the mechanism, by saying to yourself, this is Mara, this is that ego inflation pattern, you break the identification. The thought might still be there, floating around, but the hook is gone. That feeling that it's you, that personal attachment, is removed. You've disarmed it.
This same principle builds into our final and maybe most powerful safeguard. Section 6 is all about the shield of no identity.
This is such a great, practical technique. The source calls it denying the ego its landing gear. Think about that. So if a feeling of peace comes up, you don't instantly build an identity as the peaceful one. If you have a flash of insight, you resist the urge to become the wise one. The whole point is to just remain as the open space in which all these experiences happen, instead of using them as building blocks for a new spiritual identity. So to wrap this all up, I want to leave you with this really powerful question to think about, called the silence test. Just imagine this. If you were forbidden, absolutely forbidden, from ever telling anyone about your spiritual experiences or your big successes, how would that change your relationship to them? What's left when there's no story to tell?
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something really profound, a spiritual threshold known as the dark night of the spirit. So when you think of a spiritual crisis, what comes to mind? Probably something like this, right? A loud, messy, emotional breakdown. That feeling of hitting absolute rock bottom where the life you thought you knew just shatters. But what happens after that? What's next? Well, this quote from the Gospel of Thomas gives us a clue. It hints at a much deeper process. It's suggesting that real illumination, real light, doesn't just come from being broken. It comes from the total destruction of that divided self. And that question right there is really the heart of what we're talking about today. It's pointing to something subtler, maybe even more advanced, that goes way beyond that initial noisy collapse we all picture. And that's what brings us to the main event, what's called the dark night of the spirit. This is something totally distinct and honestly a much more rigorous ordeal than that first crisis most of us are familiar with. So to really get a handle on this, we have to make a super important distinction. We need to separate this second night from the one you've probably heard of, the dark night of the soul. Because, and this is key, they are not the same thing, not even close. And there's this fantastic metaphor that really helps clarify the difference. The first night, the dark night of the soul, that's like the breaking of a shell, cracking that hard outer persona we show the world. But the second night, this is about emptying the entire vessel. Everything inside has to go. Okay, let's look at this breakdown because it makes the differences crystal clear. The night of the soul, that's all about emotional despair, panic, losing your job or your social status. But the night of the spirit, man, that's different. It's this quiet, existential silence. You're not losing your persona, you're losing your spiritual identity, the deepest beliefs that have guided you up to this point. And here's the kicker. It's not some collapse that's just happening to you. It's a conscious and, very reluctant surrender. So as you go through this phase, things can start to get weird. The world itself might begin to feel kind of unstable. You might notice these intense clusters of meaningful coincidences, what we call synchronicity. But here's a really critical insight you need to grab onto. These synchronicities, they are not the universe sending you secret messages that you're the chosen one. A better way to think of them is like diagnostic tools. They're like glitches in the matrix. And what they're showing you is that the hard line between you on the inside and the world on the outside is starting to get really, really thin. And right there, that is the big trap. Oh man, the ego loves this stuff. It wants to snatch up these experiences and wave them around as proof that you have some grand, special destiny. But falling for that is a huge step backward. The point isn't that you're becoming a god. The point is that the entire construct of reality is starting to loosen up. But of course, as this whole thing unfolds, the self doesn't just go quietly. It fights back hard. And the source material we're drawing from uses the powerful archetype of Peter, the rock, to show us the basic structure of how our own minds resist this process. And that resistance shows up in these three totally predictable waves of doubt. It's so important to see these not as some personal failing on your part, but more like a standard immune response from your ego. It feels its territory shrinking, so it freaks out. First, it tells you you're not strong enough for this. Then it tries to convince you the path itself is pointless, that it just leads to nothing. And finally, if that doesn't work, it attacks your worth, saying you're not the right person for this journey anyway. So what you start to see is that this whole stage is basically a giant decision engine. Over and over a day, you get brought to this fundamental fork in the road. And this choice is so counterintuitive. Path A is the easy way out, the escape route. It's this powerful, compelling urge to go do something, start a project, save the world, anything to feel busy and important again. And then there's Path B, the actual path forward. And it looks like nothing. It just feels dry, empty, unsafe, and frankly, completely illogical. So how in the world do you tell which is which? You have to be absolutely ruthless in examining your own motives. That escape route, Path A, almost always dresses itself up as some noble, spiritual mission. But you have to dig deeper. If the real reason, the hidden driver, is to preserve your self-image or just find some comfort, it's a trap. It's a regression. Okay, so if you keep choosing that void, that empty path, over and over, eventually it brings you to the climax of the whole journey. In some Western magical traditions, they have a name for this, the crossing of the abyss. And yeah, it is the point of no return. And waiting there in that abyss is this entity, this guardian named Karanzan. Now, let's be clear, this isn't some horned demon with a pitchfork. It's described as the personification of pure chaos, of all your scattered thoughts, of what happens to a mind when the central organizing principle of I is finally stripped away. It's the ego's last desperate stand. So how do you get across? Well, you can't fight it. You can't outsmart it. You have to become what's called a babe of the abyss. What does that mean? It means you have to be in a state of total neutrality, complete openness. You can't have any personal will of your own. You have to be an empty cup. Because any little bit of ego, any tiny thought of, I'm the one doing this, that's what Corazon grabs onto. But if you make it across, the transformation is just profound. You attain a state they call Master of the Temple. And listen, the temple isn't a building somewhere. The temple is the entire universe. You stop being just this isolated person, and you start functioning as a conscious part of everything. So how do we make any of this practical? Well, here's a simple practice you can try, called the motive audit. For just 3 days, try this. Whenever you feel a really strong compulsion to do something, just pause and ask yourself one question. Is this action genuinely creating something new, or am I just trying to avoid the silence? And if the answer is you're just avoiding the silence, the instruction is incredibly simple. Don't act. Just sit with that void instead. And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Think about those 3 denials of Peter, those 3 core doubts we talked about. The doubt of your own capacity, the doubt of the goal itself, and the doubt of your own worth. Which one of those, if you're being really honest, feels most active for you right now?